CMMI, the Capability Maturity Model Integration, is a process level appraisal and improvement strategy. So we've been kind of talking in circles about what is a process. In order to really tie it down, here are some definitions that I found from the web. Basically, a process is a sequence of actions that you're going to do that are directed at achieving a particular goal. In engineering, there are basically two types of processes, plan-driven and agile. In a plan-driven process, we look at what we're going to put in a release and we figure out how the design of the whole thing is going to be before we implement anything. So in software engineering, that would mean that we do a full requirements analysis and a full design spec of all of the classes in the system before we write any code. In computer engineering or electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, that would mean that we would come up with a full CAD diagram of the entire thing that we were going to build before we built any prototypes at all. In a plan-driven process, releases are relatively long and they're of variable length. The amount of work that we have to do depends on how much functionality we're going to produce. The alternative is an agile process. In an agile process, we build the system incrementally in fixed length, relatively short iterations. So an agile organization might build something in 2-week iterations or 3-week iterations. And in each iteration, we pick some piece of customer visible functionality and we build it soup to nuts in that iteration. So our system is incrementally growing. So a capability maturity model is essentially a way of assessing how good your organization's processes are, and it also gives you a strategy for how to improve those processes. Now, the history of capability and maturity models goes back to the late 70s and early 80s in software development. We were writing a lot of code and building a lot of things that had never been before, but systems were very buggy and releases were often multiple years late. So the Department of Defense gave a grant to Carnegie Mellon University to create the Software Engineering Institute and tasked them with figuring out how to help software development organizations improve their ability to deliver quality software on time. And the result was the capability and maturity model for software development. In the years after that, they realized that the basic structure of that model could be used in a lot of different areas in a company. So they separated the software-specific part from the general framework. And the general framework is the CMMI. And then they can deploy that general framework to a wide variety of areas by adding the stuff that is specific to that area. So now there is CMMI Dev, which used to be the software one, but it has been generalized to not just be developing software, but it's really engineering in general. Then there's one for acquisition to help your company get better at acquiring the tools and equipment and supplies that they need. There's a CMMI for service if the primary mission of your organization is to provide a service. And then there is actually the same structure for people management, which would be for basically human resources and keeping your employees happy. So the basic structure of CMMI is that there are levels, and the levels define how strong your process is. And progress through those levels is discrete and sequential. If you're at level 1, there's no point in trying to be level 3 until you manage to get to level 2. And at each level, there are some generic goals. And those are the things that are generic to the whole of CMMI. And then there are specific goals that are specific to the model that you're working on. Each level within CMMI is associated with a few process areas. Those are essentially the parts of your organization that have to develop some skill in order to achieve that level. And within that process area, they have generic goals, which are the CMMI goals. And then there are specific goals for the more specific model that you're trying to accomplish. And for each of those goals, they give very specific what are the practices that have to be happen and some example work products in the specific goals. So it can be very specific about the structure of what are the things that you need to be worried about in order to achieve that particular level. So these are the 5 levels. Now I will admit there are 2 ways that you can look at CMMI, and I'm just showing you one of them, which is the staged representation of CMMI. And in the staged representation, your whole organization is at a particular level, and you go through those levels sequentially. So these are the 5 maturity levels that you can be at. And with CMM, you can actually hire people who are trained to be the CMMI evaluators. And they will come into your organization, ask lots of questions, look at lots of documentation, and assess which of these levels you have met all of the goals for. And then you can be certified to be CMM level 3 or whatever. So CMM level 1 is called initial. And essentially at this point, the process is ad hoc or chaotic. And the success of the project depends on the heroics of individuals on the team. And the team has a tendency to overcommit what they think they can get done. And when things get hard, they abandon their process altogether. So if you want an understanding of what an initial organization looks like, think about the team project that you did in design patterns. You didn't have a process. You depended on somebody on your team being a really good person. You thought you could do it much faster than you did it. And I will give odds you did not use test-driven development all the way through. Maturity level 2 is called managed. And this used to be called repeatable. But essentially, in order to be at level 2, each process has its own defined, followed process, and they plan it and manage it. They have requirements. They keep track of their work products, which means the individual deliverables that they do are managed in some sort of way. And there is somebody in the stakeholders that is reviewing what is going on. So there are 2 key process areas that are associated with maturity level 2. The first is project management. And in project management, now we have to track our requirements. So we're going to actually gather requirements and keep track of them. Project planning, which means we're going to make some estimates. We're going to try and figure out who's going to work on what when and when we'll be finished. And as the project is going on, we're going to monitor it to see, are we with the plan and do we need to redo the plan? And then if we have things that are coming from a supplier, we're going to manage those agreements as well. The second process area is the support group. You can think of the support group as they're not doing the development, but they're doing all of the tools that are associated with that development. And the support group is going to start to do some measurement and analysis. They might do some quality assurance, which means that they're doing some testing of things. But most importantly, they're doing configuration management, which means they're keeping track of all of the versions of all of the different work products. Maturity level 3 is called defined. And the difference between maturity level 2 and maturity level 3 is that the process is defined and is consistent across the organization. So all of the procedures and tools and methods that we're using are not unique to a project, but now they go across the entire organization. So getting things to be consistent across all of the projects means that we're going to have consistent ways of doing things within the engineering group. And in particular, we're going to have to pay attention to how we do requirements, how we do verification and validation, and product line integration to make sure that things are consistent across the different engineering projects. The management people are now going to have an organizational process focus instead of a project process focus. They're going to have a process definition that is consistent across the organization, and therefore they're going to have to provide training to the whole of the organization. The project management group is going to have to make sure that the way we are doing project management across all of those projects is the same. And they're going to have to do, this is the level at which they're going to begin to do risk management. And finally, the support group is now going to provide support for some decision analysis and some resolution, because things that happen are not going to happen just within a project, but across an organization. And in this list, I think it's really important to distinguish between the two middle ones. The process management group are the people who are controlling the process, making sure that the process is consistent across all of the teams, and watching to make sure that they are using it well. Project management is management of a particular project to create that particular deliverable. So process management and project management are two very different things. Maturity level 4 is quantitatively managed. At this level, everybody's doing everything consistently, but now we've identified the sub-processes that are critical, and we're going to use statistical process control or other quantitative techniques in order to manage those processes. So this is the point where we're talking about reducing variation. The first thing to note about maturity level 4 is that it came after maturity level 3. Remember, at maturity level 3, we made the process be consistent across the whole organization. Only after we have done that will there be enough data to drive making statistically valid conclusions. So once we have a consistent process across all of the organization, then we can start to do statistical process control. And the two key process areas that are going to help us do that are the process management and project management group. The process management group are going to look at process, how are we going to evaluate process performance across the whole organization. And then the project management group is going to start to do quantitative project management, because they're going to have those statistical tools to help them make decisions based on statistics instead of based on their gut. Finally, maturity level 5 is optimizing. At this level, the organization is all doing the same process. We are using data to drive our decision making, and we're going to use that quantitative data to identify opportunities for improvement, to make changes to the process as a result of that, and to evaluate the success or failure of those changes quantitatively. You'll see in this definition the phrase common cause of variation. We're going to spend a lot of time this semester talking about common cause variation. But essentially, that is the variation that is inherent to the process. And if we can reduce that, then we improve quality. So the key process areas associated with maturity level 5 are process management and support. Process management now has to do this organizational level performance management. So we're at a process level paying attention to that variation. And then the support group is going to have to provide some causal analysis and resolution. So one of the important things here is level 4, we were looking at variation. Level 5, we're trying to figure out what's causing that variation and what can we do to eliminate that variation. So the question is, where does the stuff that we're doing this semester fit into all of this? Most of the organizations that develop software are either level 1 or level 2. There are some that are level 3. There are a few that are level 4, and there are not very many that are level 5. So odds are you're going to go to someplace that is level 2 or level 3. Some of what we're going to talk about this semester, they will use in level 2 and level 3. So how we do measurement, how we gather data, how we use data to drive decisions, those things are going to be pretty common where you go. But you're going to be prepared to help your organization move further along this continuum, because we're going to talk about quantitative project management that would help your organization get to level 4. And the whole point of statistical process control is that we're going to get to that causal analysis and resolution. We're going to look at how can we use this to not only pick what we're going to change in the process, but also assess to what extent a change was positive or negative to the process.